Hey guys, what we're going to do today in our lesson is do a brief review on multiplication of fractions. You're going to find out soon enough that multiplication of fractions is a crucial part in the division of fractions. So I want to make sure that everybody knows how to multiply fractions. So let's look at this one right here, 1/2 times 3/4. Okay? Now, to multiply two fractions, all you're going to do is multiply across the numerator and the denominator. So across my numerators, I've got 1 times 3. And then my denominators, I've got 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay? So for here, my answer is 3/8. Pretty easy. Okay? Let's try another one. And the reason we're going to try another one this time is because it's going to deal with some larger fractions, or fractions that have larger numerators and denominators. And our goal is to get our answer in its simplest form. So if we're dealing with larger numbers, we're going to come up with a larger numerator and denominator in our answer, and we don't want that. We don't want to deal with big numbers. So let's do 6/10 times 5/72, okay? I could go ahead and just multiply across, and I could say, well, this equals 30 over 720, okay? Those are insanely big numbers for fractions, and I don't want to deal with those, okay? Because this is not in its simplest form, okay? To get this in its simplest form, we'd have to find the greatest common factor of these two guys and factor it out and reduce it, okay? I'm going to show you an easier way to do that without having to deal with these large numbers, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. 6/10 times 5/72, okay? Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the numerator on the first term and the denominator on the second term. I'm cross-reducing. Okay, I'm cross-reducing, that's what this is called. So I'm looking at 6 and 12. And I want to think, well, what is the greatest common factor between 6 and 12? Okay? So if I think about my basic facts, well, I know that 6 times 12 is 72. So I know that my greatest common factor between these two guys is 6. So I'm going to change this 6 to a 1 because 6 goes into 6 how many times? 1 time. And then 6 goes into 72 12 times, because 6 times 12 is 72. So we're going to make that a 12. Okay? Now, we're going to cross-reduce this way. I have a 5 and a 10. Again, I'm looking for the greatest common factor between these two guys to put them in simplest form. So I know that 5 goes into 5, and 5 goes into 10. So, that is the greatest common factor. So I'm going to change this 5 into a 1. Now I'm going to change this 10 into what? A 2. Okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and multiply across. 1 times 1 equals 1. And 2 times 12 equals 24. So now my answer is in its simplest form. Now, if I wanted to attack this, again, these are big numbers. I don't want to deal with it, but I can say, how many times does 30 go into 72? I don't know. That's a lot of work. I don't want to deal with that. So, let's see, we'll do that. 3 and 72. What's the greatest common factor between 3 and 72? Okay? Well, 3 goes into 3, and I know 3 goes into 72 just because I've worked with that number before. But for you, you might have to go ahead and factor these guys out. Well, 3 is a prime number, so I'll go 72 is 9 and 8 because it's one of my basic facts. That's 3 and 3, and then that's 4 and 2, and 2 and 2. Well, I've got a 3 over here and a 3 over here. So my greatest common factor is 3. So I can say, well, 3 goes into 3 once, and then 3 goes into 72 24 times. But I don't want to have to deal with all this factoring now, okay? We know how to do it. We should start learning how to do it better in our heads. But if I do it this way, much easier. Cross reduction, okay? Let's do one more. 8/12 times 6/12, okay? 8/12 times 6/12. Okay, now I could go across. 8 times 6 is 48, and 12 times 12 is 144. So I would have 48 144ths. That's an ugly, ugly fraction, okay? Way too big. We know it's not in simplest form. I don't want to deal with that. So, I'm going to cross reduce, okay? First, I'm going to look at 8 and 12, okay? What is the greatest common factor between 8 and 12? Okay? If I look at those, and with all the practice I've had with the greatest common factors, I can say, well, 4 goes into 8, and 4 goes into 12. I can't think of any larger numbers that go into it, so I'm going to say 4 is my greatest common factor for those two. So 4 goes into 8 2 times. Okay? 4 goes into 12 3 times. Okay? Now we're going to look at this way. 6 and 12, greatest common factor. Okay? Think about it. 6 and 12. Does 6 go into 6? Yes. Does 6 go into 12? Yes. So 6 is our greatest common factor. So I'm going to say 6 goes into 6 how many times? Once. 6 goes into 12 how many times? Twice. Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and multiply across, just like I did in the beginning. So I've got 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay? Much easier numbers to deal with. Now if you look at these, or this, it's still not simplified. I still could, they're both even, so I'm going to go ahead and simplify that even more. But it's a lot easier to simplify this than it is to simplify this. Okay? So I'm going to say, well, 2, 6, they're both even. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 6 3 times. Okay? So my answer is 1/3. Okay? But using cross reduction is going to help you immensely. You don't want to have to use those factoring trees for this. Okay? So that is how you multiply fractions. And that is how you do what we call, again, cross reduction.